We live in a world ruled by tyranny, where knowledge is suppressed and ignorance is glorified. A world where propaganda and misinformation travel the airways at the speed of lies. But in the midst of the violence and chaos, a great awakening is taking place. And as the media empires continue to collapse, a new network is forming. A network of truth, a network of courage, a network of awareness. Peace and greetings. You are now tuned into the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, where we examine current events, politics, health, finance, and topics of cultural relevance in America and throughout the world, while bringing you insightful interviews with guests that will both educate and inspire you. And now, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, Aura the Informationalist.
Please just tell me what's happening to me in plain English without the mumbo jumbo.
My aura is a network full of awareness and gifts like Aura, the informationalist.
How you doing?
Yes, peace and greetings, brothers and sisters. You're now tuned in to a live broadcast of the Network of Awareness. I'm Aura the Informationalist, owner and founder of the Network of Awareness, and your host for today's show. And we got a great show today. It's Peace of Mind is Divine with my guest, Nita Sweeney, who I'm going to be bringing on here in just a moment. But let me let you know who she is and what she does. And then we'll get this show started right. So just a couple of things in regards to some of the accomplishments that Nita's been able to do here. She's an award-winning wellness author of the running and mental health memoir, Depression Hates a Moving Target, How Running with My Dog Brought Me Back from the Brink. And she's also the co-creator of the writing journal, You Should Be Writing, a journal of inspiration and instruction to keep your pen moving. Now, she also has a third book that says, Make Every Move a Meditation, was featured in Wall Street Journal. She's also a mindfulness coach, certified meditation leader, and a mindfulness teacher, a mental health advocate, and a ultra marathoner, retired attorney, and former assistant to writing practice originator, Natalie Goldberg. Nita founded the groups Mind, Mood, and Movement to support well-being through meditation, exercise, and writing practice, and the writer's mind to share using writing practice to produce publishable work. And now for 20 years, Nita published the Central Ohio writing resource, Right Now Columbus. She lives in Central Ohio with her husband, Ed, and their yellow Labrador retriever, Scarlet, who's also her assistant. And you can also download her free book in the description page with all her information of Nita's ebook, The 3 Tools for a Happier, Healthier Mind, and the infographic Meditation Myths. And like I said, all her information is in the description page, brothers and sisters, for those that are going to be tuning in and downloading the show after. So let's bring Nita onto this show for Peace of Mind and Divine. And as you well know, she's done a lot. So she has a lot to discuss and a lot of great substance to provide on the show. So let's get the show started, shall we? Welcome to the show, Nita. Grand rising to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this to you before, but every time any person I've ever met from Ohio has been some of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life in all of my travels.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. I find it. I've lived in other places, and I really like Ohio, partly for that reason. It's kind of that right. Midwest nice. So we mean it. It's not fake.
Yeah, and and Ohio people are hardworking too. Very hardworking.
Grew up on a farm.
So let's discuss this piece of how peace of mind is divine, because it's something I feel like, and the reason why I titled this show that is because I feel like it's something that you have really tapped into on multiple levels, and you're able to share it with the world and helping people in a lot of different ways. So it says here that you was a couch potato at 49. And it says, why were you a couch potato at 49? Did you start running? And I know as a runner myself, I know how running can really be, running puts you in a meditative state. And also how running can be very liberating for the spirit, because not only health-wise, but it gives you a lot of clarity and it gives you a lot of time, especially if you're running in a place that's very serene and in nature. It can give you great peace of mind. But what was that transformation period at 49 that made you start running and get off the couch, so to speak?
Well, I've had chronic depression my entire life. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, and so I have those big mood swings, but most of it manifests as depression. Most of it presents, rather, as depression. And in a few years before I began running, I lost 7 loved ones and a cat, including my 24-year-old niece who died of cancer, my father-in-law, and my mother, and my niece's cat. It was just, we call it the year everybody died. I mean, literally 7 and the cat.
So this all happened in a year's period?
11 months. Yeah. It started in February. And then my mom died on December 30th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Her boyfriend died. Her best friend died. My husband's best friend died. His father. I mean, it was just boom, 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 boom. My niece's father died. It was just a crazy year. And so I already live with, I don't like to say struggle with, because I don't always struggle with it, but I live with this mental health condition, managed most of the time. And that just put me in a spiral. And so, I had the medical tools of medication and therapy. I've been meditating for many years, and I still think that's why I'm alive. But I had given up any form of movement at all, any kind of, what you might call exercise or fitness activities. And I was sitting on the sofa in this very depressed state, seriously contemplating whether I could endure the pain of this grief, because it was physically painful. Depression and grief are physically painful. You feel them in your body. And I was scrolling social media and I saw this post from a high school friend. And that's important because she was my age, she was my size, she was equally not athletic when we were in school. And she posted, "Call me crazy, but this running is getting to be fun." And I joke about this, but I thought we should do a wellness check on her. I'm not sure she's okay. Those 2 words, run and fun, they just don't go in together in my mind. And I watched her. And because she was someone I knew, not some famous person, not some social media star. I trusted her. And I thought, So it took a little while, but when here in Central Ohio, it gets really cold in the winter, and in spring's a big deal because there can still be snow on the ground, but the little crocuses pop up, the little, all the little flowers start to pop up, sometimes through the snow. You'll see buds on the leaves, and then eventually the trees flower. And when spring rolled around, I went and looked up the training plan that she was doing. And I didn't do it right away. In fact, I probably went back to bed after I saw it. But it stuck in my mind that it said 60 seconds of jogging. Now, it said a lot of other things. The first session was, I think, 20 minutes. But something about the fact that this was my friend that I knew, and 60 seconds of jogging, not running, clicked in my head. And that part of me that often seems like it's asleep went, I think we could do this. I think we could do this. And I was at the, what we sometimes call the jumping off place, where something's got to change, something had got to give, or I just wasn't sure I was going to be able to stay around. I mean, I just didn't know. And so I started, and I leashed up my dog as a decoy. At the time, I also had a yellow Labrador. It's been many years ago, so sadly he's gone to the great dog park in the sky. But I leashed him and took him down, walked along the neighborhood into this little hidden ravine area. So the neighbors who probably weren't home because it was a weekday afternoon, so they couldn't see me because I was afraid that people, I think it's so silly now, but I was really afraid that people would laugh at me. What is she doing at her weight, her age, all this? Will I look silly? And I probably I don't remember what I had on, but it was not what I considered running gear. It was probably, pink cotton sweatpants and Velcro tennis shoes, or I don't know. Now I would see somebody like that and I would just be cheering them on. But at the time I had all these misguided ideas of what you should do when especially running. I had the Boston Marathon in mind. And so that's how it started. And it was very gradual build. I didn't expect a lot, but I started to feel better very gradually. And people around me actually noticed at first. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my husband. I tell him everything. But I was afraid that this would just be one of those mini trampoline, aerobic step classes. It would just be one of the other things that I had tried and given up after just a few weeks. So I didn't tell him because I didn't want to disappoint him and didn't want to disappoint myself. But it stuck. And that's the thing I always say. You have to find something that sticks.
Absolutely. Commitment is key, right? What kind of running tips would you give? Because there's people that want to start running. There's people that want to get into some type of physical activity. What is a tip that you could give them on how they could start that process? Or anything that had worked for you in the beginning?
Start slow and do something that is so tiny that you can't fail. So choose a goal so small you can't fail. 60 seconds of jogging. Pretty much anybody can do that. That's what was in my mind. And I needed that because that other much louder part of my mind was calling me a loser and telling me I was never going to be anything. And, oh, you can't do this. And running's going to kill you. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to injure your knees. No, actually, runners often have stronger and healthier knees than a lot of the other people. That's a great myth about the knees. But I think that running is not for everyone. And so, again, the thing for me was finding a thing that stuck and not being afraid to try something completely different that felt absolutely out of my comfort zone in a tiny, tiny dose. So that's how I would say. But if it's specifically running, just start slow and run more slowly than you think you can or that you think you should be. Because I ran when I was younger, but I was sprinting and it was solely for weight loss. There was nothing about mental health or being out in nature, nothing like that. I ran on an indoor track as fast as I could and it was miserable. And that's not even how track stars do it. That's not even what they do. So starting slow, easing in, listening to your body, but also pushing just a little bit so that you're not giving in to what is possibly a voice that's just, it's actually trying to protect me. The voice that says you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to ruin your knees. It's actually trying to protect me. So often I will thank it. I will say, hey, I hear you. I hear that you're trying to protect me, and I've got a plan. So just give me a little bit of time here. Just hang with me a little bit and let's see how this goes. And then I just go do what I'm going to do. And that voice will come in at, mile 25 of a 31-mile race. It'll be, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to die. And I'll sort of, it's almost like I look at the voice as if it's another person and go, did you notice that we're actually doing this? It doesn't even keep track. It doesn't stay current at all. So, but right. When you first start something, that voice is really loud.
Well, you gave a great tip there, because I like what you said about setting a goal that you can't fail when it comes to exercise, because you have to start somewhere. And as long as you get a sweat in, you're in a good point of starting your physical activity. I take a lot of long walks with my dog, besides running, but even walking is really good for a long period of time. There's something here where I was reading on your bio about how it took you a really long time to publish your first book. And I remember how I was supposed to start Network of Awareness back in 2013, 2014, I was supposed to start this. I didn't start until 2020. When I started in 2020, I recorded my first episode in January. I scrapped it, and I did that for 6 months. I would record something and felt like it wasn't good enough, felt like, I was doubting it. And it wasn't until June 9th that I actually released my first episode.
Wow.
So my question to you is, why did it take you so long to publish your first book? Because now you have a plethora of literature that you've completed and accomplished. So what took you so long?
Well, I don't think I had the right story. For a long time, I was trying to write novels, and I'm not really a novelist. Well, yet. There's always never say never.
Right. And
there was also another book that I do hope to that will be published by the end of the year that was just taking me a long time. It's a book of daily meditations, and you just can't sit down and, well, the way I do it anyway, I couldn't just sit down and do that in long stretches. So until I had, the first book that I think was the right book that hasn't been published yet was a memoir about the last year my father was alive. He had terminal cancer. He was diagnosed 6 months after I had been in a mental hospital, treated for coming really close to taking my life. I was very, very depressed. It was many years ago, but it was very similar to the whole couch to marathon thing, couch to, what we just talked about. And I had polished that book, and I'd even taken it to graduate school, the book about my dad, and pitched it to agents and editors. So I spent many, many years working on that. But until I had the story about how running transformed my life from in a much bigger way, even than any of the internal shifts I had when either of my parents died, which seems so odd. That's just such a huge change. But the movement was so positive and such a, I don't know, it just was a transformation. So the right book, and I was at the right time in my life where I was had more strength and tenacity. I've always been tenacious, but marathon training or long distance running gives you a stamina that I didn't have before. And so after the book about my dad didn't get published, I think I gave up after 6 or 7 rejections. Whereas with Depression, AIDS, and Moving Target, which was my first book published by a traditional publisher, I pitched 108 agents, 132 publishers, and entered 30 contests. So I was absolutely determined, and I was at the place where I was ready to self-publish it. Nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to try all the avenues first. I wanted to try to get an agent. I did not. And then I wanted to try to pitch publishers that did not require agents. And that's where I ended up. I landed with Mango Publishing. And Brenda Knight picked me up out of the slush, what they call the slush pile, which is where you send in unsolicited manuscripts. And it's a little bit like winning the lottery. It really is, because they get a ton of submissions. So right book, right time in my life, and right time in history. The book was published in 2019, and mental health was really coming on the radar. And that's what she saw. She saw the mental health angle. Because at first I thought I was writing a book about, middle-aged woman starts running and tries to run a marathon. That story, that's what I thought was important. Well, it turns out there's a lot of people who are middle-aged women who've done that. But when I went deeper and started talking about the reality of what goes in my mind on any given day, especially as I was trying to train for these races or trying to, do this training plan, that's where it got interesting. And that's what she picked up on. So that was it turned into, it went from woman runs long distance races to woman trying to save her life. And that's where it got interesting. So it's just, your writing's tough. Most books don't sell. And Depression Is a Moving Target has sold really well. Has a good title, which was a slogan I used for years. And so that's important. And the timing was right. So, and Mango, the publishing company, it was right for them at the time, both because of where the world was with mental health, but also where they were in their business growth process. So they were willing to pick up a newcomer. I'd been writing for 20 years, but I was still a newcomer to the whole publishing scene. And so they were ready to take a chance on someone like me. So it felt a bit like the stars aligned, let's just say. And then from there, your second book is not guaranteed. So it's been another thing of having to pitch books and lots of rejections. Even now that I, quote, have a publisher, you still get rejected. And so, so that's kind of the I always give very long answers to short questions, but that's the long journey. I've been writing for a long, long time, and I finally had the right book at the right time for both me, the publisher, and the world.
Well, don't worry. I have long questions for your long answers.
Okay, good. I'm loving it.
I want to go back to when you was in your state of depression, because this is something that's very important that we need to discuss, because I remember there was a poll statistically that was done across the board here in the United States back in 2017. It said 93% of Americans in the U.S. suffer from some form of depression, whether it be consciously or unconscious. And I thought that was interesting because ever since the pandemic hit, you kind of saw that for what it really was and how people react to fear of the unknown and just something being brought to their attention that they know nothing about. Automatically, they go into a state of depression and fear and all these other things. Because you were in a state of depression for quite some time, do those feelings and emotions come back to you? And if so, how do you fight them off in the current state that you are now, in this new liberated state of mind that you found through running and the peace of mind that you were able to gain? Do you still battle with that? Do those thoughts still try to creep in?
Yes, they do. And it's interesting that you chose the word battle or fight them off, because that's what I did for many years before I learned to meditate. And with meditation, there's a quality of mind called equanimity that you practice in low stakes situations. So sitting completely still, and your knee starts to hurt, or you're standing in the grocery line and somebody's got 16 items and you're in the 15 item line or the 10 item line. You practice this sort of failure to push. Yeah, this it's a skill. Equanimity. Yeah. It's a mind state. We do drop into it naturally, but we can practice it. And so practicing letting the person have the ever so wrong number of items in the grocery store and noticing what happens inside me, inside you. So I'm standing there and I notice my throat is closing up. My face is getting hot. I feel my stomach tightening. All the things that go with either anger, frustration, fear. Let's say you're supposed to be someplace and you're afraid you're going to be late. All of those have physical body sensations. And then there's also thoughts that arise. This person is a jerk, or they remind me of my neighbor who is also a jerk. I don't mean that. I mean, I do mean that kind of, but you know what I mean? There's always some situation. It could be at work where we're irritated for different reasons. Even Ohioans get irritated. And so noticing that and letting it be. So noticing, oh, my throat is closing. And instead of reacting, our normal response is, I need these sensations to stop. And we think that the way to make those sensations to stop is to get the person with the wrong number of items thrown out of the line, or to go around them, or somehow make the situation change so that we're no longer in this situation. That is an option. That's always an option to say something to the person. We have choices. But another option is to observe those sensations and those thoughts with a high attention, a high awareness, and this balanced mind, equanimity, where it's almost like a scientific experiment where we get curious about it and we notice, all right, I'm frustrated. What does frustration feel like in my body? What are the thoughts I'm having while I'm frustrated? And letting those be. And so I do that now with depression. And when those thoughts, like I said before, those thoughts will come up and I'll notice them. And sometimes I won't respond at all. I'll just let them be and continue doing what I'm doing. Because I know, this is going to sound dramatic, but I know those thoughts won't kill me now. And there was a day when I didn't know that. And I think a lot of people, because we're not trained in this, there's a part of the mind, they call it the reptilian brain. I don't know the science. I don't know the words. I'm not a science person.
Yeah,
but,
the R-type brain.
Right. So that part is, it doesn't have logic. It doesn't have all the more complex thinking in it. And so it goes right to, oh my gosh, we're going to die. And that's its job. It's what, kept us from being eaten by tigers. And so I need to acknowledge that, otherwise it just gets louder, but also kind of ignore it, but in a kindly way. So I'm just going, I see you. All right. And I just keep doing what I'm doing. So I just keep standing in that line, or I keep writing if the voice says, oh, this is the worst thing ever. Nobody's ever going to want to read this. Or with depression, it's more, the thoughts are more about physical care sometimes. Oh, you're too tired to shower. Oh, you might as well just go back to bed. This is too hard. You really can't do this. It's too much for you. Those are the thoughts that I get. And they're different based on your personality. It's almost as if the reptilian brain knows who you are, and chooses, oh, if you're a highly competitive person, oh, you're not going to win this anyway. Or if you're somebody who needs community, nobody really likes you anyway. So it finds, I'm really making it sound like it is a person, but sometimes it feels like that, like it's this little person that I live with. And it finds the Achilles heel. It finds the thing that kind of strikes me with, and one of them for me is, who do you think you are? You're getting too big for your britches. Who do you think you are? And let me tell you, when you have books published, that is going to come up again and again and again. And so I see it, I acknowledge it, and I try to just let it be while I keep moving, or if I'm sitting, keep sitting, or if I'm writing, keep writing, just keep doing the thing I am. And then in time, it's almost as if it says, oh, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. And then it goes away. But the battling actually, when I tried to push it away or fight it, or that took so much energy that I didn't take the shower, that I did end up in bed. And that's what I was doing for many years before I learned about applying the meditation skills to mental health situations. Or it's not even mental health, it's just well-being. Because I happen to have a mental health diagnosis, have several, but it just anybody who's lived through the pandemic at this point has a tad bit of PTSD. And we all have, So that's how I approach it. It's a very different from, we hear the just do it or the toughen up or be strong. And those aren't bad. And sometimes they don't work. So this is a bit of an alternate way to deal with just really some tough struggles. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes.
When you brought up the thing about waiting online and the express line, and then that person has a bunch of items, I remember those days. I've been in Florida for 7.5 years, coming from New York, being born and raised in New York City. So that New York minute is very real. New Yorkers, they have it ingrained in them that everything, you have to have a sense of urgency to get things done. And it's a very great sense of urgency because when you're in New York, everything is fast. And if you're not keeping up with the pace, you get left behind and it's like you're useless. So I came from that mentality, and coming to Florida where everything is slow. Everything is slow, especially when it comes to customer service, when it comes to anything like a grocery store, supermarket, whatever it is, everything is slow. And it took me several years to adapt to that, to where exactly how you described, to put yourself in a meditative state in those times of stress, is what I started doing subconsciously. Because when I would get in those moments where I was just like, what the hell's going on here? Like, what the hell's taking so long? I would just take deep breaths, close my eyes, think of something peaceful, and just be like, hey, this is not worth it. This is not worth it. And it slowly but surely made me very patient, to where now, because I've been practicing it on a subconscious level, now consciously, I know that if there is something that I know is taking long, I don't even get upset about it anymore like I used to. I just accept it for what it is. And what brings me peace of mind is that I always say this to myself: this is happening for a reason. This is happening for a reason that I am not in control of. So I need to let it play out, because whatever reason this is happening for is there to serve me as well. And I learned that from Robert Riopel, who was my very first guest from Podmatch. And he said, I was like, everything happens for a reason, Robert. He goes, well, you know what the other half is? And I'm like, no, what's the other half? He goes, that reason's there to serve you. And ever since I've heard that, it's brought me a lot of peace, a lot of patience. And I just think about what you said with the whole grocery line and the express aisle. I mean, you'd be surprised how much that happens when you are, and it always happens when you have a very short time at the market where you have to be somewhere else. And then it's like the Most High God is testing you to see, are you really being patient? Because if not, we're going to find out right now. And then you get put to the test. Let's go back to running, because running has really done a lot of great things for your life, especially in regards to overcoming these depressive states that you were in and that you got freed from. So do you meditate while you run? And if so, how does that all come together?
So yes, I do. And it was a bit accidental. I had already been meditating for, let's say 2010, 15 years, I'd say. 15 years I'd been meditating when I began to run. And it just occurred to me that I was meditating while I ran, because what I would do to pass the time, even if you're with a group, at some point the conversation stops and there's kind of a lull, and you're just out there running. And that's part of the joy too, is the silence. You're in nature. You may be with people, so you're safe, especially for women. You're safe, but there's just the silence. There's just the footfalls, your footfalls. And I realized I was just listening to my footfalls, the sound of boom, 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 the sound of the footfalls. Or I have I call it my wonky ankle. I have a congenital defect in my left ankle. The bones are too close together. It's not a problem, even though some people said it was going to be. It hasn't been a problem. And I have little sensations sometimes as a result of that. So my left ankle presents me with an opportunity to just be present with what's going on in my body. And I'll just choose to notice those sensations in my left foot. And then when my mind wanders, which it will, if I've chosen to meditate during a particular interval of a run, a mile, from this tree to the next tree, from that driveway to the next driveway, whatever I choose, if my mind wanders, which it will, I very gently bring it back to those sensations in my ankle, whatever I have chosen as we call it the object of meditation. So you choose a particular thing on which to focus. If you take a meditation class, the teacher will probably start you with the breath. And they do that because everybody breathes. So there's not anybody that says, well, I can't meditate because I don't breathe. That's not the way it works. So you just choose something that is natural to you. It could be your breathing. So sometimes if I did a race on Sunday, just a 4-mile race. And during the 3rd mile, into the 4th mile, I was struggling a bit. And so I just put my attention on my breathing and just noticed in, out, in, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. Whatever it was doing, I just and even kind of said that as a mantra. And that kept me focused. And before I knew it, I could see the finish line and it was over. But it was about, again, it's about the relaxation too. So when you add focus, you have to be careful not to add tension. And that sounds weird because I am running. I run slowly, but still I'm running. So I have to also notice if there's any tension in my body and let that relax, let that drop, and keep running, and then bring my mind back to my breath. So it's a little bit of a scan. Notice my breath. Okay, is my body relaxed? Try to let that tension go, and then back to my breath. And then, all of a sudden I'm thinking about where are we going for breakfast after the run? Oh, wait, I'm meditating. Okay, back to the breath. Am I relaxed? And so it's like this little kind of chatter that goes on in my head. And it's very relaxing. And if you haven't experienced it, I know it sounds like chaos, but it actually isn't. It's actually really natural and quite fulfilling for that to happen.
So you've been meditating for quite some time now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, since 92.
92. Okay.
I'm aging myself too, but that's okay.
It's got to be 92 now. It's been over 20 years now.
Right.
So in the past 20 years, obviously this meditation, based on this discussion, has brought great value to your life. What's that? If there was one thing you could say out of all the great things that you've been able to gain from meditation, what would be the number one thing that meditation has provided for you as far as value to your life that has been transformative?
I'm going to go right to the deep one, and that is insight that I am not my body, and that I am more wave than particle, or not that I'm not my body, that my body's not solid, that my personality is not solid, that I am a process. I'm a process. I'm not a thing. And
you're a spiritual being having a physical experience.
Yeah, I don't even have to use, if the word spiritual works for you, that's great. I don't even have to use that. It's like physics. Which I know there's a lot of, conversations about the overlap there. I don't know about that. Right. For me though, it seemed as if there was this fixed thing, Nita, that was solid, and that all pain was solid, all experience was solid, joy also was solid, when in fact, it's much more fluid, it's much more moving than that. Even when I'm sitting still, the pain in my knee if I'm meditating, or the pain in my hip if I'm meditating, at first it comes on as a very solid, bright, sharp thing. And as I get curious and use that equanimity, that kind of impartial, curious, scientific way to look at it, I see that it's actually a whole bunch of different things. And it's actually kind of moving, and it's actually has pieces and parts. And some are, it might be pulsating, it might be shifting, that there's nothing solid. And with that, the sense of who I am comes and goes. And this, when you talk about this with some mental health professionals, they get very freaked out, because there are states of mental illness where you lose your personality, and that's not a good thing. But here, you're still fully present. So my awareness is fully awake, and I am completely aware of these processes. And it doesn't feel as if there's any fixed me that's there. It's all moving and changing and flowing all the time. And when I can be open to that, and when I experience that, I can't make that experience happen, but I create conditions to let it happen sometimes. And so when that experience happens, there is no fear. It's just me, very curious, watching this ebb and flow of my thoughts and body sensations as they rise, do their little dance, pass away, rise, do their little dance, pass away. Often, many of them all at the same time. And so sometimes you can't keep track of them all. So that's why you pick one. And that insight of not being a fixed self has been very, very freeing. For some people, it's terrifying. And sometimes the first time they experience it can be very scary, because we are so identified with our personality, with our fixed sense of self. It's a security point for a lot of people.
Right.
And so I remember the first time that, I don't know how to say it, but it felt like my body disappeared. So I was sitting in silence at a retreat, and the only thing that I became aware of my breath. And then even my breath kind of disappeared. I mean, I was absolutely breathing, but there was just awareness of nothing. But the awareness was still there. I didn't disappear. It was just all the physical attributes disappeared. And so I went to the teacher and I talked about that. And she said, "Oh, yes." And she kind of nodded. And she said, "Yeah, that's part of the process." And she just said, "Good work, continue." It was just like, no big deal. You just disappeared, no problem. And I thought it was some great, profound, divine state or something. So, "Oh, good work, continue." And she nodded at me, bowed at me, nodded at me. So that's just what we do. But that has been freeing, because and again, these things are so, they require experience. They're so individual and tough to explain. I mean, I love it when my body disappears. What is that even? But if you've had that experience, it's very freeing. And different people, I think, approach it, have it in different things. I happen to have it through insight meditation or mindfulness meditation from a particular Buddhist tradition. That's how I happen to access that. But that meditative state is actually a very natural state of mind that people drop into kind of on accident all the time. I actually have a chapter in one of my books that talks about you might already be doing it, meaning that people wind up in a meditative state sometimes accidentally. So that's the big one. Mental health-wise, calm, clarity, and concentration. Those are the three that have been the biggest benefits. And those are true for running also. There's so much overlap between the benefits that I get from the physical activity and all the happy brain chemicals with the benefits I get from meditation, which also produces happy brain chemicals. So when you're meditating while you're running, I don't know which one's working better, and I'll just do them both because that's what I do.
Now, you're a retired attorney. What type of attorney were you?
Well, I primarily did public sector employment and specifically wage hour, so the minimum wage and overtime laws. So I can tell you whether you should be paying somebody overtime, like if they work through lunch. It sounds silly, but my clients were government entities, and I entered the practice right after. I need to look up the court case. There was a Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court case that ruled that the Fair Labor Standards Act applied to government entities, which for years they didn't think it did. And so I entered the practice of law in the early to mid 80s when that was first a thing. And so my job was to go around to these rural county officials who they're kind of like little fiefdoms. We have counties in Ohio, and each little county is sort of its little entity with its little gods and goddesses, and mostly gods then, and tell them at, 23, 24, I was supposed to tell this judge that had been had been a judge for 30 years that he suddenly needed to pay all his staff overtime and at least the minimum wage. So it was not a terribly pleasant thing to do, because they looked at me and thought I had no idea what I was talking about. I was wet behind the ears, but I was right. I had the case law behind me. So it worked out actually well. The thing that I learned to do pretty quickly was the research and the writing. And once if I had been able to do just that forever, I might still be practicing. I don't know. But because of the situation I was in, I needed to do hearings and trial work, and that is just not my thing. And I was not in a mentally healthy enough place to say no and to carve out my niche, which now I could do that. I mean, I just do. There's just things I won't do. And as a result of that led me down a very bad mental health spiral. I also was not taking any medications. It was, I think that was the early 90s when things got, late 80s, early 90s when things got really bad. And so medications were still a bit questionable because, they put people on Thorazine, and that's not what they were talking about me. They were talking about Prozac or something like that. But it was still not widely accepted. And excuse me. And I really just didn't, I just had kind of an attitude that, I'll just work harder and I'll be fine. And I was not fine at all. So that was the first time probably the second time I came really close to dying, because I just didn't get the tools I needed, didn't get the help I needed, which then would give me the tools I needed. So.
Did you have a lot of stress when you were in that position?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The stress was part of it, but I kind of thrive on stress. I mean, some people, it's what you do with the stress. It's not, the stress is, okay, I won't say that, because there are jobs that are so stressful that they will kill people, regardless of how high stress you are. But some people enjoy a very fast-paced life where they need the stimulation of that. I did not know what to do with that. I knew that I enjoyed kind of being on the front edge of things. We used to say that if it's not on fire, it doesn't exist. We had 300 active cases and 4 or 5 attorneys. And it was a big, big deal. And of course, there's always when you're an attorney, usually there's always the billable hour quota. So you have to bill 35, 40 hours a week. That's the billable time. And you have to work an hour and a half probably for each of those hours. So I was working 60, 70 hours a week. And I didn't have kids. I was in a relationship, but I wasn't married. And I was young still. So it just seemed like what I was supposed to do. I don't know. And there were lots of things about it that I really enjoyed. Again, I was not skilled in some of the self-care things that I even saw other attorneys doing. There was a man I worked with who just flat out said, I do research and writing. That's it. I don't want to talk to your clients. I don't want to go to trial. I don't want to do these hearings. I don't want to do, he just, that's just what he did. And they accepted that. And somehow I couldn't translate that I could have done that very same thing. I mean, I did enjoy talking to clients. I just didn't want to go to trial. That was the biggest thing. I just didn't want that in front of the judge, stakes are everything. The stakes are so high. Just couldn't do that. And I just didn't see that was a possibility for me. And again, that's just where I was in my life. So when people talk about stress, I mean, I can't imagine right now being in the workplace with as crazy stress as most people have, because I see, in fact, we did, part of what we did was manage layoffs. So we would go through and figure out who was going to get laid off and who wasn't, and write the whole plan and rewrite all the job descriptions, essentially combining 3 jobs into one. And now they're combining 6 jobs into one. And, they just keep laying off people, and they don't replace them. They're being restructured, and they're not necessarily paying them more. I mean, this is kind of getting off on a different tangent, but I was an employment attorney. I can see what is going on. I did it on a much smaller scale. And so, so the way things are set up now it's a bit terrifying to see what a toll it is taking on people. And there is no amount of meditation. There is no amount of running. There's not enough antidepressants to fix that. People, if you just have a limited set of energy and facility and faculties, people are not robots, and you can only push them so far. And I see people being pushed to the brink.
Right. Something I talk about a lot, where what you're seeing is the cost of living is always going up every year. It's been like that for decades. Cost of living, right? COLA, going up and up and up. But the standard rate of pay, it steadily increases like every 10 or 15 years, which is insane. Now you have these astronomical inflation rates where everything's expensive, but the cost of living is even going up along with the inflation of products. And then you still got people making $7,000 to $8,000 an hour, which is insane. It doesn't even make any sense.
No. Well, and I have a whole theory about that, but I really don't want to go crazy into politics. But yeah, it's who's that benefiting? Just ask that. Who's that benefiting? Shareholders and the CEOs and the top level people. And so I don't know what the reckoning is, and I don't think what is happening is sustainable. And I just want to be on record to say I am not I am an influencer. Just that's what I do. When you write a book, you end up being an influencer just because that's what you need to do, sell books. And I also coach people and teach workshops and do what I can. But I kind of already said it. There is no amount of self-care at some point that is going to take care of what we have going on. You can't, if somebody cannot afford to have a roof over their head, sure, they can experience their thoughts and body sensations with awareness and equanimity. And they can, put their 7 children in strollers and run them around the block. I mean, they can do all that, but they still don't have a roof over their head. So that's, the food in their mouths. When people can't it's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whatever. But if people can't get their basic care, health care, taken care of, then yes, meditation will help you cope with that, but it's not the solution. It's not the ultimate solution. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because something that we bring out here in the Network of Awareness is how, and I'm seeing it more and more, people are finding it hard to find people to work for them. Companies are finding it more and more harder to find people to work for them, because people on a grand scale, and this started during the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit and people went into lockdown here in March of 2020, people had time to think. Everybody got forced into meditation in March of 2020. And it's probably one of the best things that could have happened for this country, especially because people said, wait a second, I could be doing something much better with my time than working for this Joe Blow. And that's what people did. They started thinking and started becoming more entrepreneurial mindset, and also just started doing different things. Even if they still were in the employee mindset, they started working for other people and putting themselves in better positions and saying, I'm not ever going back to doing this again. And now because of that, the backlash is that a lot of companies are not being able to find people to work for them. And that's why if somebody right now says, I can't get a job, there's something wrong with them, because companies are desperately looking for people to hire because they can't find anybody. So I just wanted to mention that because it's the pandemic put people, you mentioned it earlier, and I alluded to it when I was talking about how living in Florida on an unconscious level put me in a lot of meditative states and brought me a lot of peace of mind. But that's what the pandemic did. On a unconscious, subconscious level, people were kind of forced accidentally into becoming, to be put into a meditative state and really start to look at where they are in their lives and really start to practice some introspection that they never would have if that incident never happened. If that lockdown never came to be.
There's that. And then so many people died and so many people lost loved ones.
Right.
That for me, it was a priority shift. I saw people taking an inventory of what is important to me.
Yes.
In ways that they might have done when they were on vacation, but then they were back to work and, but suddenly you're in your house. You can't drive, Ohio anyway, we couldn't go anywhere. Everything was closed. So people were not driving to work. So they were thinking, why do I have this 45-minute commute twice a day? But can I do something where I don't? I mean, really, that's then
exactly what's
and then
happening.
There was the grief of, oh my gosh, all these people are dead. And so it was really just a big shakeup. And for some people, it became a positive, you call it meditative, introspective thing. Well, other people became enraged and became reactive and started to try to blame people. And so much of the response, again, based on personality, also kind of where you are in your own personal journey, your own growth curve, what your belief systems. So we have this just big shift in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people saw, if they have any entrepreneurial spirit, they saw a chance there. If I'm going to do it, I might as well do it now. No time's better. And then they also saw that the jobs, and this isn't this isn't always true, but sometimes when I hear someone say, I can't find a job, I ask more questions, because is it that they can't find any job, or is it that they can't find a job that they feel is worth it because of that priority shift? Is it because they're no longer willing to put themselves through some of the things that they would have tried to anyway? So I just think there's a lot of factors at work here. And it's just reality. And I know that what will happen, because businesses have growth cycles, some of those entrepreneurs will go out and do really well and stay entrepreneurs. And some, the market will not want what they're offering, and they will be back in the job market. It's, that's the way it cycles. But we saw this huge wave, especially I'm not so much sure during 2020, but in 2021, after things, sort of the shock was over a bit and people really started taking action. That's where I saw people stepping into entrepreneurial roles, 2021, 2022. And now we're starting to see, are those businesses making it or are they not? Because even, you could be crocheting kitty hats, that's fine. And that's a business. And so if there's not a market, if the market doesn't want your kitty hats, your crocheted hats, whatever, then you won't be able to make a living at that, and you'll have to figure out something else. Maybe you'll go into unicorn hats. I don't know, but you have to adapt. And some people can do that, and some people won't. So I think it's going to be interesting the next couple of years to see what happens between the employers going, well, crud, these people aren't going to come back here and do what they did back in 2018. We have to change. And the people going, well, crud, that, my crochet hat business didn't make it. Can I figure out something else? Or should I go back and try to get a 9-to-5 job or a part-time job? Or I think it's just going to require, it's requiring a lot of flexibility on both sides. As a coach, I sort of talk to both employees and employers sometimes. And that's what I see. I see just a lot of flexibility and sometimes big frustration that things aren't going back to, quote, normal. And they won't. They're not. It's never going to be the same. We've been through this and you can't change that. And so we see that frustration and some fear also because what seemed like a solid thing is no longer solid. Go back to my, we are not fixed things and none of this is fixed. It's all changing. And then for some people it's excitement. It's, wow, what's going to happen next? Where can I shift? This isn't working, but where can I shift? So there's still lots of opportunity, but it's everything's just changing a lot.
Yeah. And then people are now telling their employers, hey, show me the money,
Yeah, there's that.
They're using that as leverage now to say, hey, if you really appreciate the work that's being done here, you're going to have to pay for it now. And people are starting to realize too that nothing ever really was normal. What they thought was normal wasn't normal at all. It was just a level of perception that they had that made them think that things were normal until it wasn't anymore. So before I wrap things up here, I wanted to ask you, what can you tell the audience as far as where we're at right now in the year 2023, the way things are going? There's people that are very hopeful, but I think there's more people that are very scared about the future, especially in Western civilization in this country alone. I mean, even where you live, there's a lot of people that are very angry and very scared because of these damn derailments where the air is becoming toxic in certain towns and places in Ohio. People are having to evacuate their homes and having to go someplace completely different than what they're used to. So it's a lot of tension, a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty. And based on, all the things that you've been able to accomplish, especially when it comes to not allowing fear to overcome and subdue you into death. What are some of the final comments that you can share with the people that are going to be tuning into this show to let them know that they have the power to overcome and to these trials and tribulations that we're currently experiencing in this country?
I have one word that I tell myself and that I share with others, and that is stay. Please stay, because it is changing always. It may seem as if whatever you're going through is never going to end. It will end. It may seem as if you don't have the power or the ability to endure it. You do. And you may go, no way, Nita, you have no clue what I'm going through. And I don't. But I believe in the human spirit. I believe in the ability of people to overcome things that are just unfathomable. And so stay. If you can keep moving forward one small step at a time, please do. But mostly just stay, because it will change. It's actually already changing right now as we speak. This moment's gone. It's changing. So please stay. And then there is help available. I mean, there's the new 988. I don't know if they still call it a suicide prevention hotline, but it's a mental wellness hotline. If you are feeling in crisis at all, even if you're not thinking of yourself as suicidal, 988 can help you find resources if you do need professional help. And then reach out to people like me, and that's what I do. I give a lot of free advice on in my newsletter and on various channels. There's a ton of people out there that want to help, But the biggest one is just that one word, stay. Please stay.
Right. And speaking of your newsletter, for the people that are tuning into this episode, she has her website, nitasweeney.com. In the link in the description box, it's nitasweeney.com/3tools. And you can find out more about what she does by visiting her website. She has her free ebook that you can get. It's 3 Ways to Heal Your Mind. And also join her email newsletter for tips, musings, and updates as well. So, Nita, I want to thank you for providing such great substance on today's show of Peace of Mind is Divine. And is there any last comments or anything lastly that you want to say for this broadcast?
No, just thank you for the work you're doing, that you're allowing people like me to have a platform to share what we do. And I think that's so important because there's a great need. There's a great need. I see that. I hear that. And I think you probably do too. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So before we end this broadcast, let's just get some of this celebratory music again that we had here. All right. So this is episode 94 of season 5, which is Great Understandings, people. And you just heard Nita Sweeney on Peace of Mind is Divine. And we'll be closing out very soon on season 5 and then going into some bonus episodes for season 6. So I hope that this episode was very edifying and has brought great substance to your life. And for those that were able to tune in, and then of course, most of you will be downloading the show after the fact on any streaming platforms as well as any podcasts where podcasts are played. So when you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. And don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel because the light is and always will be within you. So light up the tunnel and find your way through the darkness. This is All the Informationless closing out with Nita Sweeney saying peace, love, and light, and all praises to the Most High.